Welcome to the channel. Today's story transports us to 1851, where we meet Moses Grant, a black boy born into slavery who was said to commune with the dead. A mystery science has never explained. This is a disturbing, intense tale rooted in fear, silence, and questions forever unanswered. Take a moment. Breathe. Listen closely. Before we start, subscribe to the channel and comment which city and country you're listening from. Your participation keeps these stories remembered, not buried. Let's begin. In the summer of 1851, in a remote corner of Edgefield County, South Carolina, something occurred that would shake an entire community's foundations. Something doctors could not explain. Something preachers refused to accept. Something the region's wealthy plantation owners tried desperately to bury alongside the bodies of those who witnessed it. This is the story of Moses Grant, a boy born in chains. A boy who heard voices no one else could. A boy who became the most terrifying weapon the dead ever found. And before this story ends, powerful men will fall. Secrets buried decades will rise. The screams of those who thought they'd gotten away with murder will echo through the Carolina night. But we start at the beginning. We must understand the world Moses was born into. Without it, you cannot grasp why what happened next was so extraordinary. The year is 1851. The place is the Whitmore Plantation, about 12 miles outside Edgefield. This was cotton country, rich, dark soil stretching forever under a brutal southern sun. The kind of land that made men unimaginably wealthy. The kind of land soaked in blood. The Whitmore Plantation covered nearly 3,000 acres. It was owned by Cornelius James Whitmore, the third generation of Whitmores to work this land. His grandfather cleared the first trees in 1792. His father expanded during the 1819 economic panic, and Cornelius turned it into one of the Edgefield district's most profitable operations. By 1851, Cornelius Whitmore owned 237 enslaved human beings. 237 men, women, and children who woke before dawn and worked until their bodies gave out. 237 people with no rights, no protection, no hope of freedom. Among them was a woman named Abigail Grant. Abigail was 28 in 1851. She'd been born on this plantation, like her mother before her. She worked the fields in planting and harvest, and the main house in winter. Among the enslaved, she was known as quiet, careful, a woman who kept her head down and her thoughts to herself. But Abigail Grant carried a secret that kept her awake most nights. A secret that made her hands tremble when overseers came close. A secret she'd protected for 11 years with every ounce of strength she possessed. Her son Moses was different. Moses Grant was born March 14, 1840. It was a difficult birth. Abigail labored nearly 18 hours in the cramped cabin she shared with 4 other women. The plantation doctor wasn't called. Enslaved women delivered with only the help of other enslaved women. Medical attention was reserved for complications threatening the master's property. When Moses finally came into the world just before midnight, he did not cry. The midwife, an older woman named Cora who'd delivered over 100 babies on this plantation, held the infant up and waited. Nothing. She turned him over, patted his back. Still nothing. Abigail, exhausted and terrified, reached for her child. The moment her fingers touched his skin, Moses opened his eyes and looked directly at his mother, not the unfocused gaze of a newborn, but a clear, knowing look that made Cora step backward. He still did not cry. Cora later told the other women she'd never seen anything like it. Most babies come into the world screaming. This one came watching, like he was already seeing something the rest of them could not. For his first 2 years, Moses seemed like any child born in the quarters. He learned to walk, to speak a few words. He cried when hungry and laughed when Abigail tickled his stomach. But when Moses turned 3, things changed. It started small. Moses would sit in the cabin corner and converse with empty air. Abigail assumed an imaginary friend, as some children have. She didn't think much of it. Then one evening, Moses pointed to the fireplace and said a name. Clarara star. He said it clearly, like greeting someone who'd just entered the room. Abigail felt her blood turn to ice. Clarara had been her mother's name. Clarara Grant died of fever 7 years before Moses was born. Abigail had never spoken that name to her son. She'd never even mentioned she had a mother. On the plantation, you learned early not to talk about the people you'd lost. There were too many. The grief would drown you. Abigail knelt before her son. She asked who Clarara was. Moses smiled and pointed again at the fireplace. He said Clarara was the nice lady who sang to him at night, the one who sat beside him while he slept. Abigail did not sleep that night, or the next. Over the following months, Moses continued speaking of Clarara. He described her in detail. Tall, thin, a scar on her left hand from a burn she got young. Abigail's mother had that exact scar, from age 12, accidentally touching a hot kettle in the main house kitchen. There was no way Moses could have known. No way at all. As Moses grew, the incidents multiplied. He spoke of people dead long before his birth. He described events he couldn't have witnessed. One afternoon at age 5, Moses told his mother the old man by the creek wanted to tell his daughter he was sorry for not fighting harder when they took her away. Abigail asked, "What old man?" Moses described him. Short, missing 2 fingers on his right hand, walked with a limp. Abigail recognized it immediately. Samuel Tucker. Sold to a Mississippi plantation 12 years earlier. He died during the journey in Alabama. His daughter Ruth was sold to Virginia. Samuel Tucker died before Moses was born. No portrait, no written record, no way for a 5-year-old to know what he looked like or what happened to his family. Unless someone told him. Unless Samuel Tucker himself told him. Abigail made a decision that night. She sat Moses down and explained as carefully as she could that he must never speak of the people he saw. Never. Not to anyone. Not to the other children, not to the women in the quarters, not to anyone at all. Moses asked why. Abigail struggled for words. How do you explain to a child that his gift could get him killed? How do you tell him the white people who owned them feared nothing more than what they couldn't understand? How do you make him see a black child claiming to speak with the dead would be beaten, tortured, possibly murdered, certainly sold to the most brutal plantation his master could find? Abigail told Moses some things were meant to be secret. She told him the people he saw were his friends, but they had to stay his secret friends. She told him if he ever spoke of them outside their cabin, something very bad would happen. Moses was smart. He understood his mother was frightened, and he loved her more than anything. So he promised to keep the secret. For 6 years, Moses kept that promise. He still saw the dead. They came almost every night. They whispered during the day while he worked the fields. They gathered like moths to flame. But Moses learned to control his reactions. He learned not to look directly at them when others watched. He learned to answer their whispers in his mind, not out loud. By age 11, Moses had become an expert at hiding. On the surface, he was a quiet, obedient child. The overseers barely noticed him. He did his work, kept his head down. He was invisible. But beneath that surface, Moses carried the weight of hundreds of souls. Every enslaved person who died on the Whitmore plantation over 60 years had found him. They told him their stories. They showed him their deaths. They shared their rage, their sorrow, their desperate need to be remembered. Moses listened to them all, and kept their secrets as he kept his own. Everything changed the night of August 17, 1851. The head overseer on the Whitmore plantation was Jonas Caldwell. 43 years old, from Tennessee, working for Cornelius Whitmore 11 years. In that time, he'd earned a reputation as one of Edgefield County's most brutal overseers. Jonas Caldwell believed fear was the only tool that kept enslaved people in line. He used his whip freely. He'd killed at least 4 enslaved people during his tenure, though officially recorded as accidents or illnesses. He separated families for minor infractions. He withheld food as punishment. By any measure, a monster. The enslaved lived in constant terror of Jonas Caldwell. They whispered his name like a curse. They prayed he'd fall from his horse. They dreamed the day his cruelty would catch up with him. On August 17th, those prayers were answered. Just past midnight, screaming began. The sound came from the overseer's cottage, a small wooden house about 200 yards from the main quarters. The screaming was raw, primal, the sound a man makes facing something beyond comprehension. Several enslaved men arrived first. They found the door open. Inside, Jonas Caldwell lay on the floor before the fireplace. He was dead. No blood, no sign of violence, no obvious cause. Jonas Caldwell simply lay there, eyes wide, face frozen in absolute terror. His mouth still open from the final scream. Other overseers arrived within minutes. They examined the body. They searched the cottage. They found nothing. No weapon, no struggle, no indication. The plantation doctor was summoned. He examined Jonas by lamplight and declared himself baffled. The man's heart had simply stopped. No medical explanation. As if Jonas Caldwell had been frightened to death. By morning, the entire plantation buzzed with speculation. The white overseers huddled, speaking low. The enslaved whispered, hardly daring to believe their tormentor was gone. And then Moses Grant made a mistake. He worked in the field that morning, picking cotton alongside his mother and 30 others. The overseer replacing Caldwell was a younger man named Peters. Peters rode up and down, watching for anyone slowing pace. 2 enslaved men near Moses talked quietly about what happened. They speculated how Caldwell died. One thought his heart. The other thought poison. Moses, without thinking, spoke up. He said nobody poisoned Jonas Caldwell. He said Caldwell saw something. Something that came through his wall just after midnight. Something that walked toward him though it had no legs below the knee. Something that reached out with hands missing fingers. Moses said Jonas Caldwell recognized what came for him. Recognized him because he was the one who cut off those fingers with an axe 8 years ago. Right before he beat that man to death behind the tobacco barn. Moses said the dead man's name was Henry. And Henry waited 8 years for this night. 8 years watching, 8 years building strength to cross over, 8 years planning exactly how he'd make Jonas Caldwell pay. Moses said Henry wrapped his broken hands around Caldwell's throat, not to choke him, just to show him, to make him see, to force Caldwell to look into the eyes of a man he murdered and forgot. Moses said Caldwell's heart gave out after about 2 minutes. By the end, Caldwell cried and begged for mercy. Moses said Henry gave him none. When Moses finished, he looked up and found every person in the row staring in absolute silence. He realized too late what he'd done. Word spread through the quarters within hours. By evening, everyone heard some version, the strange boy in the fields who described Jonas Caldwell's death in detail no living person could know, who named a man called Henry beaten to death years ago. The older enslaved remembered Henry. Henry Rollins. Killed summer of 1843 when Moses was 3. The official story, Henry fell from a loft and broke his neck. But everyone knew the truth. Everyone knew Jonas Caldwell murdered him for stealing food from the main house kitchen. How had an 11-year-old boy known about Henry Rollins? How'd he know about the fingers? How'd he know what happened behind the tobacco barn? There was only one explanation, and it terrified everyone. Abigail found her son hiding in their cabin that afternoon. She shook with fear. She grabbed Moses by the shoulders and demanded what he'd been thinking. Why had he spoken? Why break his promise? Moses had no answer. He said Henry stood right next to him in the field. Said Henry waited so long for someone to know what really happened. Said he couldn't help himself. Abigail knew it was too late. The secret was out. Only a matter of time before it reached the main house. It took less than 24 hours. Cornelius Whitmore heard the story from a house servant the morning of August 19th. At first, he dismissed it as foolish superstition. The enslaved always spun tales of spirits and curses. Part of their culture, their way of making sense of a brutal world. But something nagged him. Cornelius called his personal servant, a man named Thomas who'd been with the family 30 years. Thomas was as close to trusted as any enslaved person could be. Cornelius asked about the boy in the fields, the one saying strange things. Thomas hesitated. Any answer put Moses in danger, but refusal put himself in danger. After a long pause, he told Cornelius what he'd heard. Cornelius listened without interrupting. When Thomas finished, Cornelius sat in silence several minutes. Then he made a decision that would change everything. He did not order Moses beaten. He did not order him sold. Instead, Cornelius Whitmore ordered Moses brought to the main house. Cornelius Whitmore was 57 in 1851. He'd spent his life in South Carolina cotton country. He inherited his fortune, expanded it, built one of the region's most successful plantation operations. A practical man, a businessman. He didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or superstitious nonsense the enslaved whispered about. But Cornelius Whitmore believed in money. And he'd just realized the boy named Moses might be worth more than all the cotton in his fields. The spiritualism movement had swept America 3 years now. Started in New York in 1848 when two young sisters, Kate and Margaret Fox, claimed to communicate with spirits through mysterious knocking sounds. The Fox sisters became famous. They toured the country performing seances for paying audiences. They spawned hundreds of imitators. By 1851, spiritualism was big business. Wealthy families across North and South paid substantial sums to attend seances and contact deceased loved ones. Mediums were in high demand. The ability to speak with the dead had become one of the most valuable talents a person could possess. And here on Cornelius Whitmore's own plantation was a boy who seemed to have that exact talent. A boy who was his property. Moses was brought to the main house the afternoon of August 20th. He'd never been inside the big house before. Only seen it from a distance, a white Carland mansion belonging to a different world than his cramped wooden cabin. 2 overseers escorted him through the back entrance, down a long hallway, into a sitting room where Cornelius Whitmore waited. Moses had seen the master before, always from far away. Up close, Cornelius was smaller than expected. A thin man with grey hair and cold blue eyes. He wore a black suit despite August heat. He didn't stand when Moses entered. For a long moment, Cornelius simply stared. Moses kept his eyes on the floor as taught. Then Cornelius spoke. He asked if the stories were true. Could he really speak with the dead? Moses didn't answer immediately. He thought of his mother. He thought of the promise broken. He thought of all the years hiding his gift. He looked up and met Cornelius Whitmore's eyes. Moses said, "Yes." Cornelius leaned forward. He asked Moses to prove it. Moses was silent a moment. Then he began to speak. He said a woman stood behind the master's chair. An older woman with white hair and a blue dress. The master's mother. She died in this very room, in that very chair, 11 winters ago. She wanted the master to know she forgave him for not being there when she passed. Wanted him to know she understood why he stayed in Charleston that week. Business was business. She'd always told him that. Cornelius Whitmore's face went pale. His mother died December 1840. Sitting in that very chair when her heart gave out. Cornelius had been in Charleston on business. He hadn't made it home in time. One of his deepest regrets. There was no way the boy could have known. The enslaved weren't told family matters. Not informed when white family died, or where, or the circumstances. Moses continued. He said others were in the room, too. Many others. The house was full of them. They'd been here a long time. Some died in this house. Some died on the land. They were all watching now. curious what would happen next. Cornelius asked what would happen next. Moses said he didn't know. That was up to the master. Cornelius Whitmore stood. He walked to the window, looked at his cotton field stretching to the horizon. He stood a long time, thinking. Then he turned back to Moses and told him exactly what would happen next. Moses would be moved from the quarters, given a room in the servants' wing of the main house, fed better food. He wouldn't work the fields anymore. In exchange, Moses would do exactly what Cornelius told him. Moses asked what the master wanted him to do. Cornelius smiled. Not a kind smile. He wanted Moses to speak with the dead. Within 2 weeks, word spread throughout Edgefield County that Cornelius Whitmore had acquired something remarkable. A young enslaved boy who could communicate with spirits. A genuine medium. A direct line to the other side. Cornelius was careful. No newspaper advertisements. No promoter hired. Instead, he let the story spread through Southern aristocracy's social networks. A word at a dinner party here. A hint during a business meeting there. By the first week of September, requests flooded in. Mrs. Carolyn Ashford of Bonwell County lost her husband to fever last spring. Desperate to know if he forgave her for their final argument. Offered $50 for a private session. Judge Harrison Poole of Aiken County had a son died in a hunting accident 3 years earlier. Would pay $100 to speak with him once more. The Patterson family of Augusta, Georgia, lost their fortune in a bank collapse. Their patriarch died before revealing where he hid emergency funds. Would pay $500 for any information the boy could provide. Cornelius Whitmore accepted them all. The first official séance was held September 15, 1851. The client, Mrs. Caroline Ashford. She arrived at the Whitmore plantation in a black carriage, dressed in mourning, clutching a trembling handkerchief. Cornelius escorted her to a small parlor on the 2nd floor. The room prepared to his specifications. Heavy curtains blocked afternoon sun. Candles provided only illumination. A round table in the center with 3 chairs. Moses already sat when Mrs. Ashford entered. She paused, seeing him. Whatever expected, it wasn't this, not a child, not a young black boy in plain clothes, looking at her with eyes far too old for his face. Mrs. Ashford sat across from Moses. Cornelius took the 3rd chair, ready to observe and intervene if necessary. What happened next would be talked about in Edgefield County for years. Moses closed his eyes. The candles flickered, though no breeze. The temperature dropped several degrees. When Moses opened his eyes, Mrs. Ashford gasped. She'd later tell friends the boy's eyes changed. Same brown, but something different, something not the boy anymore. Moses spoke, but the voice wasn't his. Deeper, rougher, a man's voice who spent years smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. The voice said Caroline's name. Mrs. Ashford began to cry. The voice said nothing to forgive. The argument didn't matter. Never mattered. All that mattered was they loved each other 23 years. All that mattered was she was by his side when he died. All that mattered was she'd see him again someday. The voice said William was at peace. He wanted Caroline at peace, too. Mrs. Ashford sobbed uncontrollably. She asked question after question. Where William hid the Charleston property deed? What about their son's gambling debts? Did William know she visited his grave every Sunday? The voice answered every question. New details no stranger could know. Reference private conversations. Mentioned incidents years ago. Spoke with the intimate knowledge of a husband addressing his wife. After about 30 minutes, Moses shuddered and slumped forward. When he looked up, his eyes were his again. The voice gone. Mrs. Ashford stared a long moment. Then she stood, walked around the table, knelt beside the boy's chair. She took his small hands in hers. She thanked him. Told him he'd given her the greatest gift ever received. Said she'd never forget what he did for her. Then she stood, composed herself, walked downstairs to pay Cornelius Whitmore his $50. The seances continued through September and October. Word spread. More clients arrived. Prices rose. By October's end, Cornelius charged $200 per session, with a waiting list into next year. Moses performed 3 or 4 times a week. Each time he closed his eyes, allowed the dead to speak through him. Each time he channeled voices knowing things no living person could know. Each time he left wealthy white clients weeping with grief and gratitude. But something else happened, too. Something Cornelius didn't notice, too busy counting money. Moses was changing. Each time he opened to spirits, he took a little of them into himself. Each time he channeled a voice from the other side, he absorbed some of their memories, emotions, unfinished business. And not all spirits were loved ones of wealthy white clients. At night, after seances ended and clients gone home, other spirits came to Moses in his small room. These weren't plantation owners or merchants. These were spirits of the enslaved, the forgotten, the murdered. They'd waited decades for someone to hear them. Now, finally, they had their voice. An old man named Solomon came almost every night. Worked to death on this plantation in 1819. Collapsed in cotton fields during harvest. The overseer refused to let anyone stop to help. Lay dying in dirt while people he loved stepped over his body, kept picking cotton. A young woman named Pearl appeared during thunderstorms. Drowned herself in the creek behind the tobacco barn in 1836. 16 years old. The master's son attacked her, and she couldn't live with it. Walked into the water a Sunday morning while everyone else at prayer meeting. A child named Benjamin sat at Moses's bedfoot every night, watching him sleep. Sold from his mother at age 4. Died of fever on a Louisiana plantation, alone and afraid, calling for a mother he'd never see again. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Spirits stretching back 60 years. All enslaved who lived, suffered, died on Whitmore land. All souls white families used, discarded, forgot. They told Moses their stories. They showed him their deaths. They shared injustices endured. And they asked something in return. They asked for justice. Moses listened. He absorbed. He remembered. And slowly, in the deep quiet of his small room, he began to understand what he had to do. The dead had been patient. They waited years, decades, generations for this moment. They watched murderers grow old and prosperous. They watched children and grandchildren sold, scattered, forgotten. They watched white families who destroyed them build mansions, throw parties, pretend everything fine. Now, finally, they had their instrument. Moses would give them their revenge. But first he needed to wait. He needed patience as they'd been patient. He needed to build trust with Cornelius Whitmore. He needed to meet more wealthy white families in the region. He needed to learn their secrets. He needed to understand exactly who did what to whom. Because when time came, Moses didn't want mistakes. When time came, every guilty soul would pay. By November 1851, Moses Grant became the most talked about phenomenon in the South Carolina Low Country. Stories of the boy who spoke to the dead spread far beyond Edgefield County. Wealthy families from Georgia, North Carolina, even Virginia wrote letters begging for appointments. Some offered extraordinary sums. One Savannah plantation owner offered 5 prime field hands for a single private session. Cornelius Whitmore had never been happier. In 3 months, Moses generated more income than an entire cotton harvest. Unlike cotton, Moses required no planting, no fertilizer, no army of workers. All Cornelius had to do was schedule appointments and collect money. But Cornelius made a critical mistake. He saw Moses as a tool, property with a remarkable ability. He never considered Moses might have his own plans. Never imagined the quiet, obedient boy sitting across from wealthy clients might be gathering information, storing it away, waiting. Cornelius Whitmore didn't understand what he'd brought into his house. The seances continued through November. Moses met over 40 clients that month alone. He channeled spirits of dead husbands, wives, children, parents, business partners, old friends. He answered questions of hidden money, secret affairs. He delivered messages of love and forgiveness. And every single session taught him something new. Moses learned Judge Harrison Polk beat an enslaved man to death in 1844 for looking at his daughter. The judge buried the body himself in woods behind his property, never spoke of it again. Moses learned the Patterson family of Augusta made their original fortune stealing land from a free black family in 1823. Forged documents, bribed officials, drove the family off their property at gunpoint. The patriarch later sold 3 members of that same family into Mississippi slavery. Moses learned Mrs. Caroline Ashford's beloved husband, the one she missed desperately, fathered 7 children with enslaved women on his plantation. Sold every single child before age 10. Never told his wife. She never asked. The dead told Moses everything. Spirits of enslaved who witnessed these crimes came night after night, sharing testimony. They saw what white families did behind closed doors. They watched murders, rapes, thefts. They'd been powerless to stop any. They died with secrets locked inside. Now finally they could speak. Moses kept it all inside. Filed every piece of information, every name, date, location. He was building something, a record of crimes decades old, a catalogue of horrors wealthy white families committed and forgot. He was building a weapon. December came with the social season. Plantation families held parties, balls, dinners. Visited each other's estates. Showed off wealth and status. Increasingly they talked of the remarkable boy at the Whitmore plantation. Cornelius basked in attention. He became famous by association. Other plantation owners treated him with new respect. They wanted his secret. Wanted to know how he found such valuable property. Cornelius told them simple good fortune, divine providence. Blessed with a boy who could speak to the dead, generous enough to share with friends and neighbors, for a price, of course. The season's most significant event was the annual Christmas gathering at the Harrington plantation. The Harringtons were one of Edgefield County's oldest, wealthiest families. First English settlers in 1732. Over generations accumulated over 10,000 acres of prime farmland and nearly 500 enslaved people. The current patriarch was Edmund Harrington, 63, controlling more wealth than any individual in the county. His word was law in Edgefield society. His approval made a family's reputation. His disapproval destroyed it. Edmund Harrington had been skeptical of Moses Grant stories. A practical man, not given to superstition or religious enthusiasm. Dismissed spiritualism as northern foolishness, unsuitable for sensible southern gentlemen. But his wife Margarita was different. 58, deeply religious. Attended church every Sunday without fail. Read the Bible each morning before breakfast. Never recovered from her sister Ruth's death 15 years earlier under mysterious circumstances. Ruth visited the Harrington plantation summer 1836 when she suddenly fell ill. Doctors said fever. Died within a week. Margarita devastated. She and Ruth inseparable since childhood. Losing her like losing part of herself. For 15 years, Margarita prayed for a sign Ruth was at peace, some indication her sister watched over her from heaven, some comfort in grief. Hearing of the boy who spoke to the dead, Margarita knew she had to meet him. She begged her husband to invite the Whitmores to their Christmas gathering. Begged him to arrange a private session. Edmund resisted, but he loved his wife, could deny her nothing. He sent a letter to Cornelius Whitmore. The invitation arrived at the Whitmore plantation December 15. Cornelius thrilled. An invitation to the Harrington Christmas gathering was the highest social distinction. Meant he'd truly arrived. Meant the Whitmore family now considered part of the county's elite. The invitation came with a request for Moses to perform a seance, only made it better. Edmund Harrington offered $500 for a private session. $500, more than Cornelius ever charged. Cornelius accepted immediately. Moses learned of the upcoming scenes December 16. Cornelius called him into the study, explained. In 1 week, they'd travel to the Harrington plantation. Moses would perform for the county's most important family. His chance to prove himself. His chance to make Cornelius proud. Moses nodded and said, "Yes, sir," as he always did. But inside, something shifted. Moses had heard the name Harrington before. Heard it from spirits visiting at night. The dead told him things about the Harrington family. Terrible things. Moses had been waiting for an opportunity. Now, finally, it arrived. The Whitmore family arrived at the Harrington plantation December 22, 1851. The estate larger, more impressive than Whitmore property. The main house a massive Greek Revival mansion with 12 white columns across the front. Enslaved servants in matching uniforms waited on steps to greet guests. Moses brought through the back in trance, appropriate for an enslaved person. Taken to a small room in servants' quarters, would wait until needed. The Christmas gathering scheduled 3 days. Dinners, dances, hunting parties. The scene's scheduled evening of December 23. After dinner, Margarita Harrington requested a private session with only herself, her husband, and Cornelius Whitmore present. Moses spent December 23 in his small room, waiting. But not alone. Spirits of the Harrington plantation found him the moment he arrived. They'd waited for someone like him a very long time. They told him everything. They told him of an enslaved woman named Ruth who worked the main house kitchen. Not Margarita's sister Ruth, a different Ruth. A black woman purchased by the Harrington family 1834. This Ruth beautiful, 20 when she arrived. Tall, graceful, high cheekbones, deep brown eyes. She attracted Edmund Harrington's attention from the first day. Edmund Harrington forced himself on Ruth repeatedly over 2 years. His wife Margarita knew nothing. Or perhaps chose to know nothing. Either way, Ruth suffered in silence as enslaved women expected. Summer 1836, Ruth discovered she was pregnant. Tried to hide it. Wore loose clothing. Worked harder than ever, hoping no one notice. Eventually, her condition obvious. Edmund Harrington furious. A pregnant enslaved woman, a complication he didn't need. If the child looked too much like him, questions asked. Reputation damaged. Marriage destroyed. He decided to solve the problem permanently. A July night 1836, Edmund Harrington went to Ruth's cabin. Told her come with him. Led her to the creek behind the tobacco barn. There, in darkness, he held her head underwater until she stopped struggling. Buried her body in a shallow grave nearby. Told other enslaved Ruth ran away. Posted notices in neighboring counties, offering reward for capture. Played aggrieved property owner. No one ever found Ruth. No one ever knew what happened. Until now. The spirits told Moses one more thing. Something made his blood run cold. Margarita Harrington's sister, the white woman named Ruth, arrived at the plantation just 3 days after enslaved Ruth disappeared. She'd been suspicious. Asked questions. Found the fresh grave by the creek. Confronted her brother-in-law. 3 days later, white Ruth dead. Doctors called it fever. But spirits knew better. They watched Edmund Harrington slip something into her evening tea. Watched her convulse, vomit, die over 7 agonizing days. Edmund Harrington killed 2 women named Ruth. One black, one white. Both murdered to protect his secrets. Both buried and forgotten. Moses sat in his small room, absorbed this. Felt the weight settle into bones. 2 innocent women murdered by the same man. That man sat in the main house now, laughing, drinking wine, celebrating Christmas with wealthy friends. Moses made a decision. Tonight, during the scenes, Edmund Harrington would pay. The scenes began 9 p.m. Moses brought to a private parlor on the 2nd floor. Room prepared to Cornelius's usual specifications. Heavy curtains, dim candlelight, Round table with chairs. Margarita Harrington already seated when Moses entered. Face pale with anticipation. Hands trembled slightly. She'd waited 15 years for this moment. Edmund Harrington sat beside his wife. Expression skeptical, almost amused. Clearly didn't believe any real. Humoring his wife. Nothing more. Cornelius Whitmore took the third chair. Nodded at Moses to begin. Moses sat across from the Harringtons. Looked at Margarita's hopeful face. Looked at Edmund's smug expression. Thought of two women in shallow graves. Thought of the baby never born. He closed his eyes. The room grew cold. Candles flickered. Margarita gasped. When Moses opened his eyes, they were different. Darker, older, filled with something making Edmund Harrington's smug expression falter first time. Moses spoke, but the voice not his. A woman's voice. Soft, southern, cultured. The voice of Margarita's sister. The voice said Margarita's name. Margarita burst into tears. Reached across the table, grasping nothing, trying to touch her beloved sister's spirit. The voice continued. Said missed Margarita terribly. Been watching over her all these years. Loved her, always would. Margarita sobbed with joy. This everything hoped for. Proof Ruth at peace. Comfort sought 15 years. Then the voice changed. Harder, angrier. The soft southern accent sharpened fierce. The voice said something Margarita needed to know, never told, hidden 15 years. The voice said she didn't die of fever. Margarita's sobs stopped abruptly. Stared with wide, confused eyes. The voice continued. Said she'd been murdered. Poisoned by someone in this very room. Edmund Harrington stood so fast his chair crashed backward. Shouted at Cornelius. Demanded this spectacle stopped immediately. Said the boy lying. Said all a fraud, trick, manipulation. But Moses kept speaking. The voice kept coming. And now not just one voice. Another joined. Different voice. Lower, rougher. A black woman's voice who grew up in cotton fields. This voice said her name Ruth, too. Said she worked this house. Cooked meals in kitchen downstairs. Served Edmund Harrington breakfast every morning 2 years. This voice said Edmund Harrington attacked her again and again for months, in the pantry, cellar, dark corners where no one see. This voice said she became pregnant. When Edmund found out, he took her to the creek behind the tobacco barn. Held her underwater. Felt her struggle, go still. Buried her body where no one find. Margarita Harrington turned to her husband. Her face no longer hopeful. Horrified, shattered. A woman whose entire world crumbled. Edmund Harrington backed toward the door. Face white. Sweat poured. Hands shook uncontrollably. Shouted the boy lying. Shouted witchcraft, devil's work, evil needing destroyed. Moses stood. The two voices continued through him, overlapping, blending, black and white, enslaved and free. Two women murdered by the same man. The voices described exactly how Ruth the enslaved woman died. Feeling of hands pushing her head underwater. Burning lungs struggling for air. Moment everything dark. The voices described exactly how Ruth the white woman died. Bitter taste of poison tea. 7 days agony. Moment realizing her brother-in-law murdered her. Edmund Harrington screamed. Lunged toward Moses, hands reaching for the boy's throat. But before 2 steps, he stopped. Body rigid. Eyes bulged. Mouth open, silent scream. Staring at something behind Moses, something no one else see. The spirits came for Edmund Harrington. Not just 2 Ruths. All of them. Every enslaved who suffered, died on Harrington land over 100 years. Every soul worked to death, beaten to death, sold from families, discarded like broken tools. They found their way to this room, gathered around the man representing everything endured. And they wanted him to see them. Edmund Harrington fell to knees, began to cry, began to beg, called God for mercy, called his mother for help, confessed everything. Yes, killed Ruth. Yes, killed both. Yes, attacked enslaved women years. Yes, sold children fathered into slavery other states. Yes, did terrible things. Admitted all. Margarita Harrington stood frozen by the table, watching husband's complete breakdown. Cornelius Whitmore pressed against the wall, face mask of shock and fear. Moses simply watched. The spirits not satisfied with confession. Wanted more. Wanted Edmund Harrington feel what victims felt. Wanted terror, pain, helplessness inflicted on so many others. They began to show him. Edmund Harrington screamed again. Different scream. A man torn apart inside. A mind flooded 100 years suffering. He collapsed. Body convulsed. Foam corners of mouth. Eyes rolled back, whites visible. After about 3 minutes, he stopped moving. Edmund Harrington dead. The parlor silent except Margarita's ragged breathing. She stood over husband's body, looking down at man loved 40 years. Man murdered her sister. Man attacked enslaved women. Man hid a lifetime evil behind wealth and respectability. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. Simply stood processing destruction of everything believed. Cornelius Whitmore moved first. Grabbed Moses by the arm, dragged toward door. Face pale with terror. Just witnessed something defying all rational explanation. A man confessed murder, died right front him. Apparently frightened death by something invisible. And Cornelius suddenly realized the boy used to make money might be something far more dangerous than ever imagined. Next few hours chaos. Other Christmas gathering guests awakened. Doctors summoned. Local sheriff called. Edmund Harrington's body examined, re-examined. Official cause, sudden heart failure. No evidence foul play. No poison, no wounds. The man simply died. But everyone in that parlor knew truth. Heard voices. Saw Edmund Harrington's confession. Watched something supernatural tear him apart. And knew exactly who responsible. Cornelius Whitmore left Harrington Plantation that same night, dragging Moses. Didn't speak entire journey. Mind racing, processing. On one hand, Edmund Harrington murderer, rapist, man deserved whatever punishment received. On other hand, Moses just killed one of South Carolina's most powerful men. Not with weapon, poison. With something worse. With voices of the dead. If word got out what really happened, consequences. White families wouldn't tolerate an enslaved boy exposing secrets, striking them dead. Demand Moses destroyed. Cornelius had a choice. Protect valuable property, or join inevitable mob, save himself. It didn't take long to decide. By morning December 24, 1851, messages sent every major plantation in Edgefield County. Secret meeting called that evening. Topic simple, what to do about Moses Grant. Meeting at Judge Harrison Poole's home, same judge beaten enslaved man to death years earlier. Over 20 wealthiest county men attended. Sat in judge's parlor drinking brandy, discussing threat appeared midst. Story of Harrington Plantation already spread. Some details exaggerated, others suppressed, but basic facts clear. A young enslaved boy channeled spirits. Spirits accused Edmund Harrington murder. Edmund Harrington died result. Every man in parlor had secrets. Every man done things not want exposed. Every man looked around room, wondered who next. Agreed unanimously, Moses Grant eliminated. Question, how? Couldn't simply kill outright. Questions. Cornelius Whitmore might object. Disturbing possibility killing boy might make things worse.
What if Spirit became vengeful dead? What if came back more powerful? Decided approach carefully.
Take Moses from Whitmore Plantation, cover darkness. Transport far Edgefield County. Sell to brutal plantation deep south, work death few years. If that not work, if boy prove difficult, tried powers resist, burn alive. Fire destroy whatever dark magic possessed. Raid scheduled midnight December 25th, Christmas night. Moses knew coming. The spirits told him. Watched meeting Judge Poole's house. Heard every word. Carried information back to Moses in small room Whitmore Plantation. First time since discovered gift, Moses felt something like fear. Not for himself. Every enslaved person made peace with death. Only freedom count on. No, Moses afraid he'd fail. Afraid spirits lose voice when needed most. Afraid wealthy white men win again, as always. Afraid all secrets gathered buried with him. Sat darkness room, waited. Spirits gathered around. More than ever seen. Filled room. Spilled hallway. Covered plantation grounds like silent army. Waited generations for this moment. Would not let pass. Christmas Day dawned cold, grey. Light frost cotton fields. Enslaved given day off, traditional. Gathered quarters cooking special meals, singing songs, trying forget one day brutal reality. Moses not join. Stayed room, preparing. Thought mother. Abigail sent work distant section plantation weeks ago, supposedly help winter tasks. But Moses knew real reason. Cornelius wanted separate them. Wanted Abigail not interfere performances. Hadn't seen mother almost month. Wondered if ever see again. Thought years hiding gift. All voices kept silent. All stories held inside. Been so careful, obedient, afraid. Not afraid anymore. As darkness fell Christmas night, Moses walked room into cold December air. Walked across main house grounds. Past outbuildings, storage sheds. Toward quarters enslaved lived. The spirits walked with him. By time reached quarters, word spread something happening. Enslaved emerged cabins, watched strange boy walk among them. Saw something face never seen before. Calm certainty. Power could not denied. Moses stopped center quarters. Turned slow circle, looking faces around. His people, his family. Suffered alongside. Survived alongside. Deserved no truth. Began to speak. Told spirits. Told voices heard since childhood. Told dead came night after night, sharing stories, begging remembered. Told Jonas Caldwell, what really happened night died. Told Edmund Harrington, 2 women named Ruth. Told secrets learned sciences, murders, rapes, thefts wealthy white families committed. Told white men coming tonight. Plan take away, kill. Told not going run. Enslaved listened shocked silence. Some wept. Some shook heads disbelief. Some looked around nervous, afraid overseers listening. But none left. None walked away. Stood with Moses cold December darkness, waiting see next. Didn't wait long. Just before midnight, sound hooves echoed plantation. Torches appeared distance, moving toward quarters. The white men arrived. About 30. Rode tight formation, carrying rifles, ropes, torches. Judge Harrison Poole led. Cornelius Whitmore beside, face tight fear, shame. Expected find Moses alone room. Expected drag out quietly while other enslaved slept. Expected no resistance. Instead found entire quarters population standing open, surrounding small boy center. Judge Poole reined horse. Surveyed scene cold eyes. Demanded Moses Grant step forward immediately. No one moved. Judge repeated demand.
Warned anyone interfere severely punished. Said not concern. Said Moses committed crimes against white families region must face justice. Still no one moved. Judge's patience ran out. Ordered men dismount, take boy force. 20 armed white men walked toward crowd. Rifles ready. Expected crowd part. Expected fear, submission. Same fear, submission relied generations. Moses stepped forward. Walked through crowd until stood alone facing approaching white men. 11 years old. Small, thin, unarmed. Every logical measure, utterly powerless. But Moses Grant not alone. Air around began shimmer. Temperature dropped sharply, breath turned fog. Torches flickered, dimmed, flames struggling cold nothing do winter night. And then dead appeared. Materialized darkness one first, then groups, waves. Spirits every enslaved died Whitmore land. Spirits murdered, worked death, sold away, broken. Rose earth bones scattered. Emerged shadows memories forgotten. Hundreds. Men, women, children. Old, young. Some bore death marks, wounds, scars ended lives. Others appeared moments peace, strong, whole, unbroken. Surrounded Moses like army gathering general. Faced white men eyes burned 100 years rage. White men stopped walking. Judge Harrison Poole's face pale. Hands shook. Staring ghost man beaten death 1844. The man looked back expression infinite patience. Cornelius Whitmore fell hoarse. Scrambled backward dirt, screaming spirits everyone died his land moved toward. Other white men broke, ran. Dropped torches, rifles, fled darkness. Horses bolted, added chaos. Within minutes, carefully organized raid dissolved pure terror. Only Judge Poole remained frozen, unable look away ghost before. Moses walked toward Judge. Spirits parted let pass. Stopped directly front Judge Poole's horse, looked up man planned kill. Moses spoke own voice, clear, calm, certain. Told Judge dead tired waiting. Told secrets buried across county revealed. Told every murder, rape, cruelty white families committed brought light. Told Judge could run. Sell plantation, flee another state. Try escape past created. But dead find him. Always find him. Dead nothing but time. Judge Harrison Poole looked Moses's eyes. Saw something broke him. Saw faces everyone ever harmed staring back absolute clarity. Turned horse, fled night. Moses watched go. Turned back face his people. Spirits beginning fade, energy exhausted manifestation effort. But before disappeared entirely, did something Moses not expected. They bowed. 100 spirits lowered heads gesture gratitude, respect. Waited so long this night. Suffered so much. Finally, through small boy, given voice. Then gone. Moses alone living. Aftermath that night changed everything. Word spread across South Carolina days. Story grew each telling. Some versions claimed Moses summoned demons hell. Others said called God's wrath. All agreed essential facts, wealthy white men Edgefield County came destroy boy, something stopped them. Judge Harrison Poole found dead study 3 days later. Official cause, heart failure. Face frozen terror. Cornelius Whitmore sold Whitmore plantation within month. Moved Texas, never returned South Carolina. Never spoke Moses Grant again. Several other families region quietly sold properties, relocated. Offered no explanations. Simply left fleeing something could not name. Moses Grant disappeared historical record after Christmas night. No document show happened. No plantation ledgers list name. Simply vanished as many enslaved vanished era. But oral histories tell different story. According accounts past generations black families South Carolina low country, Moses Grant not vanish.
He escaped. Made way north Underground Railroad, guided spirits traveled route before. Some versions say settled Philadelphia, lived free man until Civil War. Others say continued North Canada, slavery not touch. Some versions say continued hear dead voices throughout life. Used gift help escaped slaves find freedom. Spirits guided dangerous territory, warned slave catchers, led safe houses sympathetic people hide. Certain events December 1851 lasting impact Edgefield County. Wealthy white families never fully recovered invulnerability sense. Confronted something could not control, by, beat submission. Forced face accumulated weight crimes. Learn dead not forget. Story Moses Grant survived because people witnessed Christmas night refused let die. Past children, past theirs. Became story hope, resistance. Proved even most powerless can find way strike back. Lesson Moses Grant simple profound. Cannot bury truth forever. Cannot silence every voice. Cannot escape action's consequences. No matter power, no matter generations pass, dead remember. Sooner later find way speak. Moses Grant born chains 1840. Considered property law, worth only labor produce. No rights, no legal standing, no protection any kind. But Moses Grant had something enslavers never take. He had a gift. He had connection those came before. He had ancestors' voices whispering ear, sharing stories, demanding heard. And when moment came, Moses Grant used gift tear down wall silence protected evil generations. 11 years old. Enslaved. Just a child. And changed everything.